So last week I was in California for a conference with some friends, and I hadn't been in California. I lived in California for a couple years, and I haven't lived in California in a while. It's been a solid 5 years since I lived in California, and I forgot how bad the traffic is. Like, it's so terrible. And there was a certain point, I had a rental car, and I was trying to drive about an hour's distance. And driving an hour took me a little over an hour and a half just because of how bad the traffic was. And I remember bringing up the GPS on my phone, and immediately, this is not the GPS to that place. This is to the mall, because your boy was going to go to H&M. But I also, I have a little bit of a cough, so that might happen. I'm recovering from the flu. But I put in the GPS, and I was like, oh, man, it says an hour. And you know what my first thought when I saw that little time? I think I even circled the time. Izzy, can you show that? Whenever I see this time, you know what my first thought is every time I see the time on the GPS? I think some of you think the same thing. I can beat that. That's exactly the thought that I think. Every single time I GPS something, I'm just like, it says 15 minutes. I can do it in 13. Easy, no problem. And so I thought to myself, man, I'm going to crush this hour, no big deal. Little did I know, I forgot how bad California traffic was. And so there I was, sitting in bumper to bumper the whole time. And I was just like, man, now I realize why I used to listen to so many podcasts. I was such an avid listener when I lived in California, because you're in traffic for like 2 hours a day. The worst. But man, this got me thinking a little bit about something interesting that happens when we use GPSs, or at least when I use the GPS. And just such an interesting thing happens when I enter into the GPS, my destination. Hey, Nancy, what's up? How are you doing? Good to see you, my friend. You know what's so interesting about GPSs? Did you just say what? I appreciate you, Caesar. Even though the GPS has already calculated the fastest distance to my destination, time and time again, I always think I can do better. Mercy. All right, that's the sermon. Bye. No, just kidding. And I realized something while I was using the GPS. I was like, bro, I think I do this to God too. I think I do this to God all the time. So often I have known the word of God in my life where God has said, this is the way. And I think to myself, nah, I'm going to do me. Sorry. And don't we find ourselves in situations like that where we very clearly know God's will for us. We very clearly know, man, I probably shouldn't be here right now. I probably shouldn't be with this group of friends right now. I probably shouldn't be on this website right now. I probably shouldn't be engaging in this substance right now. I probably shouldn't be raising my voice right now, getting this angry, this upset over this topic right now. I probably shouldn't be this bothered by my kids right now, this quick to lose my temper, this quick to say a hurtful word to my spouse or to a relative. And yet still, we think in our hearts, oh, I'm just going to do it my way. And so that's why I love today's message, because it speaks to anyone who is I'm a do-me person like me. And so what I want to do is I want to show you 4 different words that Jesus has for us, for all of us. If you're like me, if you're I'm a do-me kind of person, Jesus has 4 words for us. Let's dive in. There's a lot of bread. We're going to move fast, but hopefully not too fast. So if I'm moving too fast, just heckle me a little bit. Tell me to slow down. Here we go. We're going to start in Matthew 5. We are in a sermon series called The Jesus Way. We are talking about what does it look like to be Jesus people, especially in a world where there are so many other ways that are calling us, hey, walk in this way. What does it look like to be people of the Jesus way? And so let's read Matthew chapter 5 together. I'm going to start in verse 18, just verse 18, and that's where we're going to begin today. It says, "For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not an iota." Nice job, Ari, on the pronunciation of iota, by the way. Iota, not a dot, will pass away from the law until all is accomplished. So this is our first word, accomplish. Accomplished. Really quickly, we find here that Jesus, he seems to be saying to us that the law doesn't just exist to be the law. It doesn't just exist just to be a rule unto itself, that it actually has a purpose, that it is actually trying to accomplish something. Now, the question is to us, what is the law attempting to accomplish. Now, this is important. Let's pause here. I think this is important to recognize because many of us, we grew up in spaces, in church, where the law, the list of the statutes, it was kind of an end unto itself. You follow the rule because it's the rule, and there's no other reason beyond it being the rule. And I remember feeling that way at times growing up and feeling like whenever I would ask, I was a why kid. My mom would be like, hey, you can't do that. And I'd be like, but why? Why, though? I'd always be like, why? And I feel like why it comes so naturally to us. We always want to understand why. Now, we don't always get the answer to our why, right? We've talked about that. We don't always get the answer to why. And sometimes God chooses to simply not answer that question because he's a little silly, a little mysterious. He likes to be a little mysterious at times. Leave us in the dark, help us to grow our faith, to trust him a little bit more. But I think that why is a very human question. And so, what Jesus comes here to say is he says that the law isn't just an end unto itself, that we don't just keep the Sabbath because it's the Sabbath, right? That there's actually a reason, that the law has a purpose, that there's something that it's trying to accomplish. But the question is, what is it trying to accomplish? And for that, the answer, Paul gives it to us in Romans chapter 7. I think he gives us a piece of the answer. He says, if it had not been for the law, I would not have known sin. Oh, interesting. For I would not have known what it is to covet if the law had not said, you shall not covet. So, what is he getting at? He says, essentially, the law is actually what shows me what love looks like. Just said in a different way, God's law exists to show us what love actually is and is not. So we need some kind of standard or measurement or ruler in order to gauge, like, what actually is love in the world, right? Now, this is very culturally relevant, and it's very culturally countercultural, you could say, because there are a lot of definitions of love, right, as we look around the world. But I think this is really crucial and important because it gives us the ability to look around into the world and to actually have the ability to call things evil and actually have the ability to call things right and to say, hey, this is actually wrong, what's happening over here. I was listening to this debate. I don't know if you've heard of him, Alex O'Connor. He is like probably one of the most famous atheists on the internet today, right now. And he does a lot of different debates on YouTube. He's a huge YouTube following, millions of subscribers. And I was listening to a debate between him and Ben Shapiro. Some of you know that name, Ben Shapiro, yeah? And Ben Shapiro is a bit of you could say he's a right-leaning political commentator. And he has some interesting takes about culture, politics, things like that. And it was a very interesting perspective between Alex and Ben, because Ben is conservative and Alex is an atheist and a progressive, and they were having this debate whether or not, it was all about whether or not the Bible is actually good. And it was such an interesting debate for me to watch and listen to, because I was thinking, man, they're using this word good a lot. But if there's no objective standard for what good is, how can we even use the word? It's just a nonsense word. We're just throwing around meanings that have no meaning, right? And so what's so interesting, and what I think Jesus is getting at here, is he's saying that God's law actually shows us what love looks like. That it's like a measurement or a ruler, and it shows us, hey, love looks this way. Now, this is actually really, really important for us, because we live in a time where there's a lot going on in the world, right? We live in a moment of, you could almost say, unprecedented ideological polarization, right? I don't know if you have felt that as well. That conversations with people on the other side of the aisle, whether that be liberal, conservative, progressive, traditional, whatever labels you want to put on it. We don't want to label people generalized, but speaking broadly, whatever camps you fall in, it seems like things are more and more polarized today than they were, say, 10 years ago or so. And it almost seems like every day it gets worse. It's like it almost seems like we can't even have conversations across the aisle anymore. But this, what Jesus is saying, that God's law actually exists to accomplish something. And what that thing is to show us this is love. This is love. And so this really enables us to have a bit of a prophetic voice when we look around the world, When we look around in our communities, what's happening, it enables us to look at things that are happening in our community and say, as a church, hey, what you're doing over here, this is actually wrong. This is actually unjust. This is actually harming the dignity and the humanity of these people, right? It enables us to look, hey, you're harming this vulnerable group. You're harming these children, right? And it enables the church to be the ones in society to be able to stand up and be prophetic, right? This is what the prophets of old would do. They would stand up and they would say, what you're doing is wrong. You have neglected the widows. And God's upset about it. God cares about that group of people. And so all of this to say, I love that Jesus says that the law is something that is accomplishing something in the world. And I think it's a good reminder to us not to lose our prophetic voice. It's so easy for us to surround ourselves with simply just political and religious and ideological information that is just reinforcing what we already believe. But the question is, are we coming back to the book? And are we saying, okay, what is the book saying about this? Right? What is the book saying? Letting the book lead. Okay. I spent a little time on that. We're going to move on to the second word. Jesus says the second word in Matthew chapter 5, verse 19. He says, therefore, whoever relaxes one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. A bit of a harsh word, a heavy word. Every now and then Jesus has a word that's a little heavy, a little difficult. Now this word relax, we're going to focus on. This is our second word, relaxes. Whoever relaxes one of these commandments. Now, this is an interesting word, relax. It's a word in the Greek called luo, and it refers oftentimes in the New Testament to when people are loosening the straps of their sandals, interestingly enough. This is the word that John the Baptist uses when he says, man, I am not even worthy enough to untie the straps of his sandals, speaking of Jesus. This is the word he uses. So this word relax, Jesus uses, he says, whoever relaxes. Now, let's talk about sandals for a moment. Any y'all, let's talk about sandals. Let's talk about chanclas real quick. Any y'all Birkenstocks people? Okay. Oh, Birkenstocks are going out. Okay. Here is the ultimate question. Are Crocs sandals? That was a quick yes. Who said no? No, Crocs are not sandals. Why are Crocs not sandals? It's not the same material. Okay, I respect it. I respect that take. Crocs are not sandals. I respect it. Well, sandals, I bring up sandals because in the first century, in a time period where having a solid pair of sandals was everything, right? This is a time before vehicles. This is a time when most people could not afford a horse or a mule, right, or a camel. Your average commoner, you needed to have your sandals like on deck. You needed to have a solid pair of sandals. Sandals were clutch in this time period. And so if you did not have a sturdy pair of sandals, you could not get to your destination. And I feel like it's a good illustration Jesus uses here by using this word that's used to untie sandals. It's almost as if he's saying, whoever relaxes the sandals, man, you're not going to get to your destination without your sandals on. Whoever relaxes the calling. Now, we have to be careful because what Jesus is not doing, I think, and we see this as we continue the Sermon on the Mount, what he's not doing is he's calling us into a very strict, legalistic keeping of the letter of the law. We know that's not what he's doing because all throughout the Sermon on the Mount, he's calling deeper, he's calling higher. He's saying, we're not talking about the letter, we're going beyond. So we know that's not what he's doing, but I do think the temptation is that as we mature in Christ, as we get to know Jesus, we receive his love, we receive the gospel message, that we are saved by grace through faith. There is nothing that I could ever do to ever earn God's favor or salvation. There's nothing I could ever do to manipulate God into loving me. That God's love comes to me as a gift, and I can only receive it. And as soon as we believe that message, something interesting can happen in our life when we receive that, is that all of a sudden we're like, okay, God, well, I'm free. There's nothing I need to do. So I'm just going to live in freedom. And therefore, I'm going to just do me. But Jesus says, no, actually, I'm calling you the opposite direction. I'm calling you higher. I'm calling you deeper. I'm calling you into more integrity. I'm calling you into more honesty. I'm calling you to more intentionality, into higher character, not lower. But it's not unto salvation. It's not trying to earn something. It's not trying to grasp something from God. But Jesus says, I'm calling you higher. And so my question for you and for me today is perhaps, maybe, here's a question for you to ponder. Is it possible that perhaps in some area of your life, I don't know what it is, only you, is it possible in some area of your life you have loosened the straps of your sandals? That you were headed in a direction, and the sandals were what were going to keep you there. The honesty was what was going to keep you there. The integrity was what was going to keep you there. But you have loosened. Now, again, we're not talking about shame. We're not talking about condemnation, right? And I say this all the time. We have to remember, Jesus never weaponizes shame in order to motivate us to change. He never says, oh, you're such a bad person, so you need to change. He never uses condemnation. But he is calling us deeper. He's calling us higher. Okay, third word, he says exceeds. This is Matthew chapter 5, verse 20. He says, or I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Now, this is an interesting one. And it's no surprise to us that Jesus picks the scribes and the Pharisees because in this time period, in this place, in this community, these were the people that were seen as like the religious elite. These were the guys. They kept all the laws, over 600 different laws. They kept them all to the letter, to the mark. And so in this community, Jesus says, your righteousness must actually exceed that in order for you to enter the kingdom of heaven. What is he saying? You need to be a better person and then you can enter heaven, right? Almost seems the temptation to read it that way. You need to be like, think of the most religious, spiritual person that you know in your life. You need to be even better than them in order to enter the kingdom of heaven. Is that what he's saying? Ooh, interesting. Now, this word exceeds is an interesting word because it means to abound, to overflow. Exceed, to abound or overflow. Now, we need to keep that in mind. Because the question is he talking about perfection? Is he talking about character? Okay, let's figure it out. Now, a second word in this verse, righteousness, this is a word in the Greek that essentially is synonymous with justice. Righteousness and justice in Greek, they're the same word. And so, our temptation, I think, when we read the word righteousness and that Jesus is saying, hey, your righteousness needs to exceed, or the temptation is to say, okay, well, my actions, my keeping of the rules needs to exceed. But this is the same word that's used in the age-old verse that says, hey, there's only one thing that God requires of you. To do justly, do justice, same word, love mercy, walk humbly with your God. So what is he saying? Is he talking about rule keeping, or is he talking about justice dwelling in your life? I think sometimes the temptation for us is to make so much of this intellectual and about rules when Jesus is constantly calling us to character and to heart. He's calling us to character and to heart. And so that's always the temptation. We've said it before. That's always the temptation of Christian religion, is to make it a checklist. When Jesus is saying, the checklist is easy. That's too easy. I'm going for the heart. The checklist, you can do it. Go to church every single Sabbath, mark off the check. You can, eat stripples only, never eat bacon. Perfect. Man, I love me some stripples. Perfect. You did it. You did the checklist. But what's more difficult, what's a higher calling, is where was your heart when you were eating the stripples? Was it thinking, oh, I'm such a spiritual person because I'm not like that other person who eats bacon? Jesus is trying to get at the heart. He's calling us deeper and beyond the checklist, deeper and beyond checklist religion, into character, into heart. And so, Jesus says, he comes to announce, and he says this all the time in the Gospels, perhaps you've heard him say this, that the kingdom of heaven is here, that it has already arrived. And he says this all throughout the Gospels. He says, hey, the kingdom of heaven, I have come to bring the kingdom. And in fact, the kingdom, it's not coming, it's not on its way, it's here, it comes with me. I'm the herald of the kingdom. So it's already arrived, almost like another reality that has overlapped our current reality. Y'all seen Stranger Things? It's a bit of a throwback at this point, but Stranger Things was a show where there was like the normal world, and then beneath the normal world, there was like this other reality called the upside down world. And it was like this dark world, essentially. And I think what Jesus comes to do is he comes to announce the opposite, is that there's this world, but Jesus has come to announce not an upside down, but almost like a right side up reality, a right side up kingdom that has come with him. And he's saying, you can join the way this kingdom operates. And so let's read that verse again. He says, unless your righteousness, unless your justice indwelling in your life exceeds that of the religious folk, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven, the way that God's kingdom operates in the world. Essentially what he's saying is you won't have eyes to see beyond the portal of this world into the way God's kingdom works if justice is not indwelling in your life. But all of a sudden it is, and you become a justice giver. You become the kind of person who is righting wrongs in your family, in your community, in your workplace, amongst your friends. When someone is making fun of someone, someone's clowning someone else, and you're the only person in the crowd who's standing up, and you're just like, actually, no, I don't feel that way about them. All of a sudden, you've shifted into the way the kingdom operates. N.T. Wright, he says it this way, the scholar N.T. Wright says, God's kingdom in the preaching of Jesus refers not to post-mortem destiny, not to our escape from this world into another world, but to God's sovereign rule coming on earth as it is in heaven. I love it. Let's go to the final word. This is our final word, fulfill. And for this, we're going to circle all the way back to the beginning of this section of verses, Matthew chapter 5, verse 17. Jesus says, do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. Ooh. Now, this is an important verse, because if you have existed in and around Christianity, other spaces of Christianity, perhaps you've heard a phrase that has been used and is used, which is this phrase, that the law has been done away with. Maybe you've heard that phrase before. I have lots of conversations like this with other Christian friends. Because I'm an Adventist, I keep the Sabbath, and they say, well, why do you keep the Sabbath? The law has been done away with. You don't need to keep the Sabbath anymore. And I say to them, oh, that's interesting. That's interesting language. And then we have a conversation about it. But it has been something that Adventists have wrestled with since the start of our journey. Sometimes we have gotten it wrong, and we've talked about that. At times we have turned where Jesus is calling us into deeper heart religion. We have turned it into checklist religion. But Jesus comes, I think, to set the record straight here. He says, I have not come to abolish, to do away with, to say that the law is meaningless and empty, that it doesn't matter. I have come to fulfill the law. Now, this word fulfill is very interesting in the Greek. It's a word that is pronounced plerao, and it means to fill fully or filled to the top, filled to the brim. Now, this is very interesting. I need to do an illustration in order to show you what this means. Thank you, Graham. So, essentially what Jesus is saying is this. He's saying the law was given to this community, right? The law of Moses, the Ten Commandments, everything in Leviticus, Deuteronomy, everything that God spoke to the people of Israel, right? That the law was given, this is God's heart, to show them what love actually looks like. Hey, here's how to be a community of love that orders yourself around love. And so God is almost like he's filling up their cup with some water, but it's not fully filled, according to what Jesus is saying. Let me just take a little bless. It's not fully filled. It's filled to a point, up into a point, but it's not filled to the top. But what Jesus says is, I have not come to abolish the law, but I have come to fill it to the top, to fill it to the brim. And so what he does is he says, as I'm teaching, and we're going to look at this throughout the following weeks as we're going through Matthew chapter 5, as I'm teaching, and some of you know the verses where Jesus will say, you've heard it once said, do not commit adultery, but I say unto you, if you look at someone with lust, you've committed adultery, right? He's going beyond checklist religion to the heart. He's going to character. And so he's saying, I've come to fill the law to its full purpose, to its full completeness. Graham, engage the bucket. And so what's so interesting about this, I think, is that so many of us, we are content with just an unfilled cup, which is just checklist religion. When Jesus says, I've come to fill it fully. I've come to fill it, meaning you. I've come to fill you fully. With what the law's original purpose and intention was to actually change the heart, to be overflowing. Thank you, Graham. Can everyone give a little? I've come to fill you, bless. I've come to fill you fully, to the top, overflowing. And so what I've had to realize and ask myself this difficult question: God, why am I content with so little when you want to give me so much? Why am I content to just come to church every Sabbath and say, well, I checked the box off my list. Well, I did my devotional every day. Okay, I guess I'm good. When God's like, no, I want to call you deeper. Like, I want more for you. I want more integrity in your life. I want more honesty in your life. I want you to go deeper. I want you to go beyond that person that you cannot stand, that you could not forgive. I want to change your heart so that you miraculously have a space in your heart where you can say, with tears in your eyes, I forgive you for what you did to me. I want to actually change you so that your spouse, that thing, that recurring thing that bothers you so much, you actually have a new grace and a new perspective and the ability to say, you know what, this thing actually doesn't affect me anymore because I have a new level of grace and tenderheartedness towards you. I want to actually create in you the character so that temptation that has always plagued you, you can look straight at it and it would not affect you. There'd be a higher level of character. And so, Jesus says, I want to fill you fully. The question is that what we want? There's a final verse I want to read, and then we'll close here. And then I'm going to invite my friends Matt and Josie to come up and sing a song for us. It's a verse a little bit earlier in Matthew chapter 5. And it says this. Jesus says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst. Now, this verse could be a whole sermon in and of itself, and it has been. But what's interesting is that final word. Can you all say that word with me? Satisfied. Isn't that interesting that Jesus does not say, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for justice, for they shall be perfect. He doesn't say, for they shall be sinless. He doesn't say, for they shall have flawless character and never make a mistake. He says, they shall be satisfied. And so what I want to do is I want to propose to you that all of the moments in your life where you have run to things to satisfy you, all of the moments in your life and the times in your life where you were down and you were just trying to cope, all of the moments in your life where you were grasping at things just to feel better in the moment, that really the whole time what you were craving was the righteousness, the justice, the Spirit of God in your life. And what Jesus says is he says, blessed are those who hunger. And you know what's interesting about hunger? The only way to hunger is to actually engage. The only way to thirst is to drink. Something really interesting happened to me when I was sick 2 weeks ago. I'm going a little long, but I was sick a couple weeks ago, like terribly sick. I had the flu. Some of you have also had the flu. Vanessa, I know you also got it. How many of y'all have been sick with the flu in the past month? Okay, yeah, good handful over here, yeah. So I had the flu and I was in bed and I was drinking more water than I usually do. We've talked about this before. Sometimes your boy doesn't be drinking water. And just because I'm a sparkling water addict, I'm working on it. God is working on my heart. So I'm always drinking sparkling water, but to just drink water. When I was sick, I was just crushing water. Like every single day, I had this giant thing of water. And I was crushing water. And you know what happened? It was something really interesting happened to me as I was drinking this water. You know what happened? I got more thirsty for the water, like as I was drinking it. And all of a sudden I found myself, I'm just like the middle of the day, I'm just carrying around my little thing of water, and I'm just like, bro, I'm kind of thirsty, right? And just doing the whole thing, just throwing down the water, like crushing water. In the middle of the night, waking up, where's my water? Like crushing water. And what I found was so interesting is that to cultivate a thirst, I had to drink. And so what I would submit to you, Maybe it's been a hot minute for you. Maybe it's been a month. Maybe it's been a couple weeks, couple days. Maybe it's been a year for you since you truly went to the source and had a drink. But I would submit to you, perhaps it's time to drink again. And in the drinking, the water, not in drinking. In the drinking of the water, we can cultivate a thirst for what God wants to fill us up with, which is really, in the end, himself. Amen.